The Rebel Capitalist Show. It takes me back to the Patriot Act, and I know you've studied this and you've written so extensively on FATCA as an example. And my big concern when this came out, I started talking about, I call it the cerveza sickness to kind of be YouTube friendly, but I started talking about this, and this is something we need to look at way back in January of 2020. But I didn't know how bad it was going to be. But the one thing that I said is, okay, let's just make sure the governments give us all the information and let us make the decision as to how we want to approach it. Because if we allow the government power, they're never going to give it back. So if what we saw as if FATCA and the Patriot Act was a result of 9/11, what do you think is going to be the result of 2020 and this last crisis that we've dealt with as far as future size and intervention and micromanagement with big government?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, they don't ever seize power with the intention of giving it back. That never happens.
Right.
There I go using absolutes. So this is where I have to check my own logic and go, have they given it back before? Actually, they have. If I think about it, if you go back really thousands of years, and I actually sort of like this concept in ancient Greece, and to a degree in the Roman, not even the Roman Republic, but what predates the Roman Republic is when they still had the kingdoms and so forth. And these very early days, whenever there would be a crisis, a really serious crisis in the actual technical Greek sense of the word, they would often appoint a dictator, and the dictator would take full and totalitarian control over the city-state until the crisis passed, and then would relinquish it. And so there was actually historical examples. I can actually prove my wrong when I say they never give it back, because sometimes they do. And actually what they used to do, and I actually like this tradition, is a lot of times they would put these people on trial and to actually judge all the things that they did and didn't do. And if they found there's any malfeasance or impropriety, then the person could be put to death.
Wow.
So essentially the death penalty was the punishment for corruption, malfeasance, impropriety, and even ineptitude.
If you were given politicians left, Simon.
Right, exactly. Nobody would be left. I mean, if you were put in a way that if you're given that level of responsibility, then there should be kind of a commensurate, level of punishment if you screw it up. But I think, with respect to you saying, so many people I think can be really surprised, and again, going back to this gentleman that I spoke to in Australia, it's a great book. He wrote a book about it. It's called Great Hysteria in the Broken State. His name is Sanjeev, and Sanjeev wrote about his experiences and the things that he saw. And he's an immigrant. He came to Australia because he thought it was the land of opportunity.
Wow.
And now all of a sudden he's seeing the worst, most totalitarian lockdowns, police being used as violent brown shirt enforcers. They start off and they close the national border. Then they close the state borders within Australia. So we acquired a company in Australia, for example, in the northern, far north of New South Wales, near the border of Queensland, for example. You just can't get back. They have employees on both sides of the borders. It's a total mess. Then within Victoria, not only they shrink it to the state border, then they started shrinking it around the city of Melbourne, and they created this iron wall around Melbourne, and then they started shrinking it even further into neighborhoods. You can't go more than however many feet or whatever from your home. It's completely insane, right? And so that's he calls it public health terrorism, which is a strong word, but he sort of backs it up and he justifies it by saying, when you think about sort of what the idea of terrorism is sort of making people afraid in order to exact some agenda. He makes a very strong argument that that's really what this is, because they're not really focused on the data. They're focused on the data they want you to see, not the data they don't want you to see. And the idea is they want you afraid, to cower in fear in your homes, to be terrified, and they end up taking an enormous amount of control. And I think the future of that, in the same way that we saw after 9/11, Homeland Security became the big deal. Homeland Security they had all the authority. They could do anything they wanted to. And we started seeing all the civil asset forfeiture and all those trends where the government just come in and take your assets. You haven't done anything wrong. They even tell you, no, you haven't done anything wrong, but we're still going to take all of your assets because you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The fact that you have no more banking privacy, the fact that it's impossible to do even just basic, simple, innocuous things anymore without mountains of paperwork that your banks have to treat you like criminal suspects now because of these laws that they passed. And all this had to do kind of went back to Homeland Security, and they were the big shots. Now it's going to be the public health officials. Those are going to be the guys that have their powerful fiefdoms. These guys are going to be, feudal warlords that have all this power. They get to decide all this. Right? It reminded me of it's just this weird kind of like prima noctas kind of stuff where they started telling young people like how you should have sex, wear a mask, don't face each other, do it in this position and all this stuff. And you just have to look at this and say, are these people serious? There's no end to the amount of power and influence they want to have over every part of our lives, including the most intimate acts that human beings can engage in.
Right.
And they're literally trying to insert themselves. They're trying to insert themselves into the most intimate acts.
Yeah, maybe insert isn't the right word.
Yeah, maybe. Because I heard myself say literally insert. I go, well, then maybe they're not literally inserting themselves into that. So, unless you're into that sort of thing, I guess. So, but it's revolting, it's degrading, it's disgusting. But they are really like feudal warlords now, because and the thing that's different is that before, with the, I think, post 9/11 world, it was the federal government that had all the power. Now it's local. I mean, the federal, yeah, sure, the federal is going to have all the power, but now it's state officials, county officials, local officials. And this is a thing that I always try to remind people of, is when we think about politics, we love to sort of complain the most about national politics. And that's the one that really gets all the headlines. That's what we all talk about the most because it's a thing that everybody sort of has in common.
Right.
State politics matters a lot more because when you think about it, state government's going to raise your taxes a whole lot more, a whole lot faster than the national government is going to do. All the things that they change in terms of business regulations, all that stuff, the state government's going to do it much, much faster. The biggest one, though, is the county. The local officials, the municipal and the county officials, because those guys, I mean, they're going to do the same thing. They can jack up your property rates tomorrow. If they want to change your property tax, done. But they control everything. They've got the public county health officials who get to have, they get to have their own little fights and say, in this county, you can't do this, you have to do this, whatever. And their word is law instantly. Right. They get to dictate what goes on in the public schools, what your children are taught, and they control the police. So if you have a, Christmas get together and mom and dad come over, they can send the police over your house. You get like Eric Garcetti, it says, oh, we're going to cut the power. We're going to cut the power. These heretics are out there, having part. How dare they go and see their family?
Right.
And so they have the power to do all of these things that even the federal government can't do, or isn't willing to do, or, the apparatus is too bureaucratic. But the local guys, they are all over that. They send the cops over. They cut the power. They teach your kids all these things in school. And so it's the local that actually matters most,
right,
by far. And so people think like, oh, the country, whatever. It's like, yeah, fine. Think about that. But I was telling our Total Access members this when we had our event in Mexico this past weekend, is that everybody has to make a very deliberate decision where you've got to look at where you live locally. Forget about the country. And this is everybody. Well, I don't care if you're in France or you're in Australia or you're in South Africa or in Canada or the United States. It doesn't matter. You got to look at locally where you live and figure out who really has the power. And in a lot of places in the United States and parts of Canada as well, it's the local that matters most.
Right.
And you got to look at where you are locally and say, do I want these people in charge of my kids? Do I want these people in charge of my safety? Do I want to listen to these public health officials because they have so much power now? And by the way, this is power that they were never awarded. Nobody ever appointed a public health official and said, I want that person to be able to dictate every aspect of my personal life. I want them to tell me when I can go out of my house, whether or not I can go to work, whether or not I'm allowed to earn a living for my family, how I should have sex with my wife or my girlfriend. Yeah, I want this person to tell me all that information. Nobody was ever awarded that authority, yet they have taken it for themselves, and we just kind of go, well, there's nothing I can do about it.
You're
Well,
right.
there are plenty of things you can do about it, but the most important thing is to start looking and go, do I want to outsource all the decision making in my life to that person?
Yeah.
Because the answer is no, then you need to make a change in your life. You need to make a very deliberate decision about it.